In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 385. Last week, I had the pleasure of heading down to San Diego to check out the press event for this year's Without Walls Festival, which is coming up April 27th through the 30th. While there, I had the honor of walking the still-in-progress set of Optica Moderna's next immersive theater piece, LUCHA, and talking with this week's guest, director and designer David Israel Reynoso, who just so happens to be one of our favorite creators here at NoPro. We had two excellent conversations, and I managed to actually record one of them. Fancy me, which you'll get to hear that one in a minute. Now, LUCHA is going to be previewing during WowFest, and then will be opening formally in May. From the build alone, it's clear this is the most ambitious project from Optica Moderna to date, and I expect not only all of our listeners in the Southland to make time to check it out, but hope that those outside the region either give it a go during WOW or add it to their SoCal travel agenda this spring and into summer if we're lucky. A quick disclosure here before we go on. The La Jolla Playhouse set up accommodations for me while I was down there for the press event and to talk with some folks in San Diego. All right, gotta do that part. Keep it all on the up and up. Now, if you want more on WOW, we've got a preview article up on the site right now with our 10 picks for can't miss shows. And yes, the LUCHA preview was one of them. A little bonus on the rest of the WOW lineup. The shows are free this year, save for the LUCHA preview tickets. This year's fest sees the return of Brassroots District live in the lot Summer 73, which we did a whole feature on back in the summer of 2021 when it was here in LA. Also, there are works from NoPro favorites like Jessica Crean and Unique Trapman O'Brien, who are bringing their piece Fair Trade to San Diego, and Denver's Control Group Productions will stage a version of The End as part of the fest. Check the show notes for the Brassroots feature and for that preview article that I put up this week. You'll also find a new review rundown bursting at the seams with, I think, 7 reviews, Leah Davis's Intercon U LARP diary, and the expanded March call sheet, which has a whole bunch of artist calls out in it right now. And you can find all of it in the show notes or a little bit later. Not even a little bit later, like right now on the front page on the website. Why did I say a little bit later? A little bit later for you because you're listening. Maybe you're in the car. You don't want to do things. See, that's why I said a little bit later. I know. I'm thinking about you. 2 more things, both of them good news before we go. First, we're extending the deadline for scholarship and subsidy applicants to the Next Stage Immersive Summit, which is coming this June to downtown Los Angeles. And where guests will have a chance to meet David Israel Reynoso and creators like him, along with creative leaders from the La Jolla Playhouse, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Department of Wonder, Games for Change, the Escape Game, and more that I'm just waiting for the green light from corporate communications to share. All thanks to our partners at Arizona State University's Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, who are welcoming us into their home at ASU's California Center in Los Angeles. It all takes place June 2nd through 4th, and those who are looking for assistance in coming have until 11:59 p.m. on April 2nd, that's the Sunday when this drops, to get their application in. We've only got 20 full scholarships and 20 subsidized tickets, which are at $250 a piece, which is half off the list price of $500. So, if you need some assistance this year, we know it's a tough year for a lot of folks. Don't hesitate to put in for it. And you've got until just before midnight on the 2nd. All right? Don't say we didn't warn you. For everyone else, badges are on sale now. Check the show notes for links. We hope to see you there. Finally, one more piece of good news. We made our Patreon campaign goal. Oh, my landlord is so happy. We now stand at $3,047 a month, thanks to a few more backers and another sustaining backer, another person coming in big, bringing the total number of backers up to 432 folks. Here are the folks who pushed us over the top: Joe D. Rowe, Mehdi Farah, and new sustaining backer John Boulette. Thanks to them and everyone else who jumped into the campaign, something like a fifth of all our backers have arrived in the last month and a half, which is just incredible. And man, I wish we could keep that pace up. But this is tiring. It really is. But thanks to them, thanks to all of you, the newsletter is staying open to all. Not putting up the paywall. So glad we're not doing that. It would be a bunch of work and really would just kind of bind us. Now, I can take a little bit of heat off the old campaign call, but remember, everything we do is community supported, and we're just a bit over the halfway to the actual sustainable mark. So if you can, remember, as little as $2 a month at patreon.com/NoProscenium not only powers the podcast and websites for NoPro and everything immersive, it also gets you into our member-only Discord. It's member-only now. If you're already a backer, drop a review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice and share the articles you find useful on your social media platform of choice. It helps immensely in this day and age more than ever. Hey, that WoW article, that's a good option right there. We are always No Proscenium on social media, except on Insta, where we are No_Proscenium. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers: Samuel Mustry, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Tom Leonetti McGuire, Winthorne, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hanson, Lecker LeCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. Oh, I did not do that in one breath. That was two breaths, right? I had to take a breath in there. Listen to the tape. We're also on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. We got a lot of folks, and they have very good taste in immersive. So maybe you want to attract their attention. Okay. This has been a long one. So let's get in this interview with David. It is a joy. We are here sitting in an office of the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego at one of their downtown locations, right next to the train station here in San Diego. Sitting across from me is David Israel Reynoso, the artistic force behind Optica Moderna, whose works Waking La Llorona and Las Quinceañeras have been some of our favorites here at NoPro over the years. And there's a whole new show, La Lucha, which is previewing in April here in SD and opening in May, the previous part of the Without Walls Festival. And David's been gracious enough to... I got the tour of the set twice on 2 different days, got to watch it evolve over 2 different days, which is really exciting because a whole bunch of work is happening. And David's sitting across from me right now. Hi, David.
Hi, Noah. It's a delight to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
It's so good. I feel ashamed because we had a really great conversation yesterday. And I was like, we should have recorded that. But
It's all good. Happy to revisit I've been thinking about the things we talked about yesterday. So
good.
It's been on my mind.
Let's before we get into what we were talking about yesterday, which I think I do want to share with everybody because it was good combo. What is La Lucha? Yeah, what is La Lucha? What are you making for us right now?
Yes.
Look at that, making for us. Look how greedy I am.
It very much genuinely is being built for the general us. No, it is... La Lucha is a new Optica Moderna show that is only being made possible by the generosity of a partnership between La Jolla Playhouse and MCASD, Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego. It's a dream come true for me as someone who loves immersive, loves creating immersive, and who's very passionate about creating stories that represent and honor my heritage. You know, both Waking La Llorona and Las Quinceañeras were about really holding these kind of amazing stories on a pedestal and seeing things that people might make assumptions about in terms of Mexican culture, and getting a chance to give them some, I don't know, the richness that I find in my both imagination and my heart. And I decided being able to really impart that same love through a visceral, multi-sensory experience that I hope people carry with them, and that it leaves an imprint on them in the way that I carry those with me. So La Lucha is a new piece that is inspired by Lucha Libre. So those of you who are less familiar with Lucha Libre, it is a form of Greco-Roman wrestling that kind of really has been most exemplified in Mexico, as you may have seen a lot of wrestlers who wear these very ornate masks oftentimes. And within Lucha Libre, many wrestlers who do obscure their faces live in hiding in some ways. There's a bit of kind of a living incognito. And sometimes that sense of really preserving that privacy is of such high stakes to the level that people will wager their masks sometimes if they're in a wrestling match. And when a wrestler is defeated who's wagered their mask is removed. There's great efforts to shame and somewhat ridicule this person who's lost. And for those who don't wear masks, their heads are sometimes shaved. So I became very interested in kind of that pomp and circumstance, if you will, surrounding the rituals of Lucha Libre. And I thought there's ways in which we kind of adopt those same rituals in our day-to-day and our wrestling ring lives. And so this is a piece that really takes the visual tropes of Lucha Libre and tells an imagined story of 4 characters who are embarking on a journey to really uncover their authenticity, if you will.
What I love about the story you're setting out to tell here is this idea of identity and mask and who we present to be, who we hide, the public persona that we create, the roles we're called upon to play, and then what's really inside of us, what all of that is hiding. And like over the past couple of decades, as the internet has connected us all, like the lines between who we are, our public persona, our ability to like tell when someone's, presenting themselves in good faith and presenting, or maybe they're being duplicitous. All this stuff has become even more intense than it was in the last media phase of our lives, and it's always there. That idea of who you are at home versus who you are in the street, versus who you are at work, and that you have this wonderful sort of mythopoetic canvas to play with is exciting.
I agree. I'm terribly thrilled. I still kind of wake up and think, I can't believe this is happening. It really is. I mean, the scale of it, as you've gotten to walk through,
the scale is amazing.
So, I mean, what we did Waking La Llorona, I mean, that experience was sort of having so every 5 minutes we had one person go through, and in total, that was between a kind of 25 to 30 minute experience. And then when we did Las Quinceañeras, we had 2 people go in every 5 minutes. And that experience, I think, was somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. Here, we've created an experience that 8 people every 5 minutes, essentially, 16 people every 10 minutes, if you will go through this. And the way that this has been designed is for there to be moments in which you are having these very intimate scenes, one-on-one with a performer. And then you sometimes get regrouped back with your, maybe some friends or new friends, if you will, that you've just gone through the experience with, and then get separated again. And there's a level to which there's these kind of liminal moments within the experience that are meant to kind of leave it both to fate in terms of where you might end up. But what I love about it is it's very much designed to be something that you walk away holding a piece of a puzzle that you're meant to then put together with those you just experienced this with.
And that's a big difference from the first piece. And you had some of that in Las Quinceañeras, where you would get, depending on which track you were on, you would get a version or view on the story. And here you've so leaned into that. So having the privilege of walking the set as it's being constructed, and to see like, you load 8 people in, and they're, some people are getting 1, and some people are getting two people to a character, or 4 people to a character. So it's really interesting to see like everyone's experience starts differently. So right from the jump. And then there's other moments, I think there's twice where you bring everybody back together and break them apart. And there's something about, this is something I love about that we can do in the immersive form that you can't really do in anything other than, video games, right? Is providing people these unique perspectives on the narrative, and then sort of requiring, like you just said, that they come back together at the end, and to fully understand it, you have to piece it together with your fellows.
Absolutely. And what I love about that is that something that, I think I was saying this yesterday, but
this is what we were talking about yesterday.
The idea that an individual experience can become a communal experience.
Yes.
That I always, I say to people, like, in the way that you might go on a trip on your own, but then you come back and you want to then tell your loved ones and friends about what you saw and the cool stuff you saw and the things that happened to you. And suddenly in that retelling of what had happened as an individual, that then becomes a communal experience in the fact that it's in the way that storytelling is a communal experience. So my hope and intention with this project is that, you may come with friends and then want to then sort of compare stories and sort of like, what did you see when you went through that door? I think also this idea of, you might timidly walk in with some strangers and then afterward, want to then, really inquire what they saw, and then find yourself sitting at a table, sharing a drink.
Just everyone knows there will be a cantina on towards the end.
Gotta have it. No, and I just felt like, I think it's really, important, and I think really is to, certainly there's in a lot of immersive experience, there is that idea of having something, a space to then gather back together. And when we did Waking La Llorona, that hadn't been part of it in terms of what we considered in the design of it. But inevitably, there just so happened to be, there was an amazing sort of brewing company right next door where people just kind of landed afterward. And the thing that was interesting is that people who completely didn't know each other, but, just sort of would see someone walk in and be like, oh, did you just go through that? And I'm like, oh yeah, there's kind of a shared level of understanding, like, oh, what you just saw. Well, what did you see? How was that? And then started wanting to untangle what they took away from it. And so it felt like, well, let's embrace that. And let's embrace that even further to the point where we get to make a space that's equally visually lush and sort of feels fun and secretive in some way, but is meant to very much inspire the idea of assembling that puzzle.
You were talking a moment ago about, someone would come out of Llorona and recognize, that someone else had seen it, right? That connection across. And like one of the things we were talking about yesterday is this idea of like, when stories stop being your own and become ours, and like that sharing of story, and that moment, we wax poetic about that sometimes on this show, about that being part of the secret sauce of immersive, part of the thing that makes this form, very different. But also, this is something I was saying yesterday, for decades, since like the dawn of mass media, it was increasingly about how communal stories became solitary stories. It became about your story. It became about, you're the protagonist, how your story is in the world. What's your story? How are you going to be the hero? And in all that, we were losing a lot of the R, right? Like, what is our story? And as I was going along the set yesterday and seeing how you were moving people through it and doing this purposely fractured narrative and then pulling people back together, and then at the very end, you can go off to the cantina with those folks if you want. They might be your friends, they might be new friends. You'll encounter other people who had a different run. That suddenly here we are very much moving it back to our stories, like how we get a communal story, which is so hard in this day and age when the algorithm is tailoring, things directly for you, right? Like how we break out of that experience and have something that is truly shared as opposed to sharing, right? It's the sharing economy, right? As opposed to sharing something so that someone can have an individual experience of it. How do we create something that is a shared experience? And that involves physically altering how people are, interacting with the space. Like you've got these three big gallery sort of spaces that you've built into, and you've turned it into like, how many
rooms? I don't even know how many there are, but there are so many, and there are all these very kind of individual corridors. I mean, I think the thing that I always find is a currency, if you will, toward sort of building community and relationships is intimacy, right? And I think so much of that intimacy requires vulnerability. And that is certainly could be it's a scary word. It's a scary word, this idea of kind of like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable, but it kind of requires that sense of being able to trust someone, to then be able to feel like you have the opportunity to then connect. And the Optica shows, and I know a lot of immersive shows also do this, they require a level of trust from the audience. There's a sense of having to release some things, or sort of release some control, and let yourself be sort of submerged into a new world, a new experience. And I think there's something in that exchange of consent, that exchange of being someone offers out their hand and you take it. There's a level in which you are building intimacy, vulnerability, that then on the other side of the experience, you are, I think, in a place in which you feel more open and more ready to want to then connect with a stranger. I think I know for myself, I'm someone who, for whatever reason, I think, we can give it many sort of definitions to why this happens to us as individuals, but I become very kind of closed off, either because I'm in my phone or because I'm isolated in sort of my thoughts, and it's easy to not look outward. And I think even though we're doing some things to really shift your vision, in some ways kind of localize it and limit it, my hope is that then when you come out of this experience, your vision feels sort of broader and you want to then now really connect. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really critical when you're talking about vision, particularly in your practice, right? Like it's Optica Moderna, and you have this onboarding that's been common to all of your major works here, where the metaphor is an optometrist, and you're doing optometry test stuff. How did you settle in on that as the onboarding, and how is keeping that as part of the practice for each show influence the way you see connecting with the audience?
When I was creating Wake in La Llorona, I was really thinking about that story and all the layers in terms of what people's experience with that story is, and I think how that story has inspired many, both horror and haunts, which I think is so cool. But then I sort of thought, well, I'm not sure that that's what I'm interested in creating with this piece, and yet I don't mind that borrowed language is sort of seeping into what you assume your experience might be. So, and yet I wanted people who were familiar with that story to be kind of invited to look at it from a different perspective, through a new lens, if you will. And for those who didn't know it, this idea of being able to be exposed to it, And I think I came across an image by Manuel Álvarez Bravo, who's a Mexican photographer in the 1930s, and there's a sort of reverse, purposely printed in reverse image of an optician's office. And it's on the window in sort of painted letters is Óptica Moderna. And that is where the name came.
Oh, wow.
Of this sort of 1930s Mexican optician's. There's something about looking at something that felt super nostalgic and then being called a modern optician's. I thought, that's it. And, I sort of thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to just, in the way that we kind of, I think with immersive, we require levels of liminal spaces of threshold crossing.
Yeah.
It felt like that feels like an interesting point of departure. And I think too, there's so many layers to this idea of someone then evaluating your vision before you then have something you put on something that then is going to shift your perspective. And I think too, our relationship with medical practice, there is a level to which we have to trust the experts, right? You want me to look into okay, I'm putting this on. There's something about feeling like, I'm in the hands of someone else who has some expertise and authority in this space.
Yeah.
And I think it allows you as an audience member to just kind of go along for the ride when you feel like, okay, someone's in command, if you will.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk amongst other creators, some academics, about this idea of using social scripts, or like putting someone in a social role. And this is something I was talking about yesterday. We were standing in the hallway that's going to become the office, as it were, the onboard space. And I find this trope you're using of putting people into a social script that they know how to deal with, which is like, I'm going to the eye doctor. I know what I'm supposed to do. And that they then start focusing on their vision and how they're relating to their vision. It becomes front of mind, not in the sense of like, I'm telling you to think about your eyes, which people might throw up a wall against or just abstract themselves out of, but just actually getting them to do the thing. And that one, priming them to not be in the normal mode, whatever they just were in. It's different from what they're going to be doing, but also focuses their attention where you want to focus it.
Absolutely.
Before you plunge them into this other world.
I think too, I was, inspired by how it is that we do that so often in life, in the way that we shift our realities from a moment to the next in terms of like both with VR or like, playing a video game or like putting in headphones to listen to music, that there's this moment in which we can flip a switch and sort of just activate something in our brains that feels like, I'm traveling somewhere new right now. And it felt like that idea of borrowing from that, I guess, like you said, kind of knowledge that we already kind of have embedded in the way that we function, that gave permission for that invitation to travel through the portal, if you will. And I think too, one thing that I think I've always been inspired by is this idea that things or moments that feel rather ordinary in our day-to-day life, like what happens when suddenly it feels like, wait, this feels familiar, but then perhaps it feels like these people also hold magical powers, or there's something kind of something else at play here that I didn't know I was signing up for. And then what it does, it gives this sort of third layer to feeling like, this is bigger than the physical realm, if you will, in some ways, I always think about kind of how I love, there are, here in Balboa Park, there's, some really beautiful vendors who sell, like necklaces and jewelry, and, they lay everything so carefully on a blanket on the sidewalk. People walk by and treat them completely like invisible human beings. And I suddenly thought, I just wish people could imagine that they're just so remarkable. And that, like, what if in some ways the people who are oftentimes not considered to be magical actually hold the greatest magical powers? And so I thought, well, maybe there's something about, both opticians or perhaps people within our, both in this cantina or in other, spaces within this experience, that it invites a closer look. Sort of like you're now faced with humans that maybe in times past may have been overlooked, may have been sort of invisible to you. And here, no, face them, give them the dignity that they deserve in this moment, and allow yourself to sort of be released into this new world.
there's something really fun about sort of this idea of the vibe I get from the opticians, the technicians around a show of yours. It's that they're like doctors of the impossible, right? Like that they have, and what they're giving you is like, you know, the lens on which to see an invisible world.
Yes, exactly.
And the metaphor just stacks and holds, right? Like it works, but not just on a poetic level, on a mechanical level.
Oh yeah,
right.
There are some very practical reasons for why we do that too.
Yeah,
yeah.
And that I think the first show, like you were using like a repurposed, I think, Samsung Galaxy like thing,
VR goggles.
Yeah, VR goggles that like you were supposed to like put a phone into, but you like ripped out the lenses so that it wouldn't damage anyone's eyes with light. And it was just so weird of like putting it on and being like, and I was like, oh, I've done this before. I'll put
I know
a VR.
happening.
I know what's happening to VR. And then suddenly the thing comes down, and I'm not looking into like a screen. I'm looking to the world through that box, and I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. Like, you know, I put blinders on in order to see better. Like I'm having my vision focused on what's in front of me.
You know, the irony of talking about this on No Proscenium does not escape me, but I think there is something about taking inspiration from a theatrical proscenium.
Yeah.
In the fact that you are, you embrace that anything outside the frame is sort of this invisible, your brain fills in for the rest of it, right?
Yes.
You sort of just see this cross section of a moment when you see something in a theatrical, sort of traditional theater space. And the irony is, by localizing your vision in some way, that then you are kind of like your own cinematographer as you're now moving through this space. It gives so much importance to whatever's in the frame. And I think too, you now have kind of these like pictures that live in your brain that,
I mean, as you talk about this, I'm having memories of the shows. Like there's certain indelible images from those two shows that, like a Viewmaster, keep popping up in my mind, like being at the bar, being offered a drink, right? You know, watching someone walk away from me after they've like, you know, taken the Obscura down in the second show. Just moments like that are burned into my retinas because of that intense focus on what's in front of me.
It's sometimes not. It's sometimes we linger more with the things we don't fully see. Yet sometimes when we have full peripheral understanding of things, we're not able to sort of really zero in. And something about, I think a good friend of mine said something about kind of this idea of sometimes when you see less, you see it kind of with more importance. And I think there's something really gorgeous about, I think, and the way that I think when we walk through in our dreams, you know, it does feel fuzzy along the edges, right? Like we feel like there's a focused, you know, frame of someone's face, but it feels like the rest feels a bit fuzzy. And I think this idea of inviting someone to participate or, you know, walk through a space that is meant to feel dreamlike. I want them to fill in the blanks and the fuzz, you know, that exists outside of that frame.
Yeah. You don't just direct and produce and generate original immersive work. You also design for the largest pieces. You know, you work with Punch Drunk, Sleep No More, and The Burnt City. And you also design for, you know, conventional, you know, theater, Broadway bound stuff. What keeps you coming back to the immersive form and generating original work? You could possibly lean into a different career path, right? Why play around in this space, which can be so rewarding emotionally, but so frustrating from a practical standpoint?
I think the key word you just said is play around in the space. It reminds, I mean, what's interesting, when I was creating Waking La Llorona, that came about through a grant that I received by the San Diego Foundation called the Creative Catalyst Grant. And I remember thinking, how am I going to execute this thing that feels so clear in my head, but I just don't even know how to take the steps to do it. And the only way that then it felt not as intimidating was to think, okay, what would 9-year-old David do to create this?
Oh my God.
So, all right, if I was making this in my bedroom, in my closet, and like how would I do this? And so that's where a lot of it unlocked this idea of like, well, this would be fun. And what if this? And I would make it out of this. And it felt like suddenly it unlocked every possibility. Instead of feeling like, oh, I need more money, or I need more time, or I need more support. Instead it felt like, oh, this is an invitation to do something fun in the way that like I would invite my parents to come watch the show and that I'm doing, And I think there's something about that has always felt very important to me. I grew up loving theme parks and always dreamed of getting to be an Imagineer. And so that idea of being able to tell something on a level of kind of a story that is led by visuals and experience and your senses just felt something I was always very hungry for. And so when I had the opportunity to get to work with Punch Drunk, it felt like, oh my gosh, this is the intersection of so many things that I love. And I just can't imagine not telling stories this way. I always describe, regardless of what the discipline is, what I do as a designer, both costumes or scenic or immersive, is that my role as a designer, as an artist, is to be a three-dimensional illustrator. In the way that you see, there's this, like in a children's book, there'll be like this, the text holds equal importance to the visual, and the visual is there to support the story. And if it ever gets in the way, it is not succeeding. But seeing this idea of like, that is my role, to create this idea of something three-dimensional that is in support of a story. So then with the work that I do with Optica, the story is very much at center, and yet there's a lot of very non-verbal things with this, the storytelling. So it's very much led by visuals and sound, and I work with an incredible team of people who have been so generous in terms of supporting the work that I've done with Optica. And these things do not happen on their own. I get to have my name associated with these projects, but the list is infinitely long in terms of all the people who have been so generous and loving toward give their talents to make this work possible.
Well, I can't wait to experience LUCHA in its fullness, and I'm so glad that you keep on coming back to the well. You keep on making work here in San Diego, and we like every few years it feels like the pattern is we get a new gift. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's a delight. Thank you for all your support, and I look forward to having you here and I invite all of you all to come see La Lucha. It's
you better. If you're hearing this, you better.
It's a labor of love, and I just feel infinitely proud of the work that's being done here.
Once again, I want to thank David Israel Reynoso for being our guest on the show this week. Do go check out La Lucha, whether in preview while it's at WOW or when it opens fully in May and carries on into June. And of course, the more folks go see it, the more folks who get to go see it. That's how live theater works. You get to extend runs, but don't wait. Go see it at the start. That's what we need everyone to go do. And if you haven't had a chance to catch the work before, and a lot of you haven't because, Waking La Llorona was like one person at a time, and Las Quinceaneras was 2 people at a time. This is 8 people at a time. A lot more people can go through. I think like as many people will get to see La Lucha on opening night as who got to see Waking La Llorona, period. Which is very exciting. But it also means that we really got to get the word out there because not that many people have gotten to see the work before. So please, please, please go check it out. Now, if you're a creative who finds David's work inspiring, you might consider coming down to the Next Stage Immersive Summit, which is going to be in Los Angeles. I talked about it at the top of the show. If you're listening to this on the weekend that this drops, remember the scholarship and subsidy applications will close at 11:59 p.m. on the 2nd. This is an extension, a 2-day extension on that, because we want to give people a chance to get it in if they're only hearing about it now. They hear about it afterwards. Well, we've already got people who've put in and we've got to address them. All right. So sorry, too late if you're listening to this on like Tuesday. That doesn't mean you don't have a chance to go. Badges are on sale right now. And who knows, by the time you hear this, hopefully some of those corporate comms I'm waiting on will come through and I can make a couple of really fun announcements, because there's some players coming in that have made some really, really big moves over the past couple of years. And I am excited for all of us to get to hear what's coming next, how they do what they do, and indeed for folks to connect. Because remember, the next stage, we're only selling 200 badges all totaled, with 40 of them are the subsidized and scholars, and then 160 are the rest. So there aren't going to be that many people at this thing. It is an intimate event. It is a fantastic place to meet your next creative collaborator, to meet your next client, maybe. A really, really wonderful, wonderful chance just to get the whole community together. All right. So give that a look. All that's in the show notes. If I sound really jazzed up, it's because I got to get on the road in the next few minutes. The Tempest Immersive Experience from After Hours Theater Company and the Shakespeare Center in Los Angeles is happening right now in LA. We're going to have folks from After Hours on the show soon, if all works out properly. And I'm going to see it tonight, so that instead of just being like, hey, so this show of yours, yeah, I get to, talk about it in an informed manner. You can also find Kevin's review of the show in this week's review rundown. It's up for a few more weeks before the Shakespeare Center goes through some major renovations. So this is kind of a last hurrah in the old spot, and another chance for After Hours Theater Company to get their immersive groove on. Of course, another disclosure, After Hours is our partner on the Los Angeles Immersive Invitational and have helped us pioneer a really cool format we do in the creative community. So there you go. I'm having to make more and more of these disclosures these days, but that kind of means things are going kind of well. All right. On that note, let's do the end credits, because I got to get out of here. The associate producer for No Proscenium is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. I nearly Sean Connery'd all of that. And this podcast is written... don't do it. I'm Noah Nelson. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.